Hey folks, welcome back to LA Not So Confidential. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Dr. Scott.
And I'm Dr. Shiloh. Welcome back.
We're really glad to be back this week. We have a really fascinating subject that, like we've said before with a lot of the things that we talk about, we're really only going to be touching the tip of the iceberg of a very in-depth subject, and that is cults, specifically cults native to Southern California and Los Angeles. You could go down a complete rabbit hole. I mean, I did this week doing the research for it. I'm sure you did too.
Last night I was literally saying out loud, stay on task, don't go to this page.
I know, right? Because you could just keep doing...
Right.
And then there's so much to cover, especially within just that genre. And...
Well, and I think you had specifically gotten a request from somebody to look at the profile of people who join cults.
Right.
And you could look at the profile of cult leaders and obviously just go global with the history of it. But have you always had an interest in this topic? Because cults don't really speak to me that much.
You know, I'm completely knocked off by that question.
Yeah.
I was not expecting it. I wasn't. But yeah, I've been fascinated by it because, I think that there's an innate human drive to connect. And developmentally, if you don't have a particularly strong or positive template for that in your family dynamic, you may seek it out elsewhere.
Sure.
So I'm going to leave that to you to fill in more information.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm more along those lines now, and this research has piqued my interest. I've just always had it in this box of like, okay, that's those people doing their thing,
right.
Something I would never in a million years be involved in, and wasn't necessarily super interesting, I guess, in the kind of fold of like all the other true crime stuff for me. But it's just like human behavior. Yeah, fascinating.
Let's be very clear too that not all cults are necessarily ever going to have any intersection with law. Right. Or crime. That we're not making that statement at all. But what we are going to be talking about today is I've picked out 3 particular examples that are specific to Southern California, 2 in Los Angeles and 1 in San Diego, because it was such a big deal for the time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's something, here, I think Southern California, and the research that I did on this, one of the things I find really fascinating is that there are several theories about why so many cults have either started in Southern California or started in the West.
Yes.
And flourished here and either continued, moved on to other places and died out. But there was a particular time in history when this was the great frontier.
Right.
There was no one looking over your shoulder. And this was something that I found really interesting, is that many of the spiritualist cults and religious and healing-oriented cults arose out of a lack of medical doctors. There were no medical doctors out here in the 17 and 1800s. There just wasn't anybody.
Well, and there's this sort of mystical piece of, California nature and the different, just from here we have pretty good elevation close by, 10,000-foot mountains down to beaches.
So there's mystery.
There's mystery, and there's something very spiritual about all those different elements that people, for decades have found interesting or healing.
Or they're drawn to them for whatever reason.
Right.
One of the things that was pointed out in the research that I thought was really interesting that I wasn't expecting was that dearth of trained medical professionals especially in the mid 1800s. I'm sorry, 1900s. Let's not get too far off in our history. What there was out here was a lot of Chinese immigrants that had come for work and been horribly abused as migrant workers. But what they brought with them was traditional medicine, which was very potent and well researched in its own right, but it was very different from Western medicine, and it seemed very mysterious to the whites that lived here. who then also, they were getting medical treatment from these people that they could barely communicate with.
Right.
And they didn't have their own Western doctors, so this led to this growth of sort of experimenting with spirituality, which also, there's an intersection there. There's nothing like in the rest of the world compared to what happened in the last couple of hundred years here in America with the development of spiritualism that started really after the Civil War. You see a big explosion of these kind of movements after wartime because so many people die.
Right.
Maybe not so much now in the modern world, but after the Civil War, there was just this explosion that started with the Fox sisters in Tennessee.
People are just trying to make sense
Out of
and
tragedy
find meaning and
loss.
purpose in life.
Exactly. And unfortunately, a lot of them got taken advantage of by self-professed mediums and clairvoyants. But
Wow.
here I am getting pulled off in another
Come on
rabbit
back.
hole. Come back, Alice. Okay. So when we talk about cults, the word itself now really holds. It really has a pejorative tone to it, or a pejorative context to it, when at the beginning it really didn't. What it was is a derivation or a descendant of the French word culte, which was also related to the word culture, meant to cultivate and to also inhabit or to have been of worship. So there's a very interesting, who even thought that our culture, the word culture itself comes from
Right.
worship.
Right.
So what happened is that it came into use in, I think, medical literature in the 1930s for what we now would be calling faith healing.
Okay.
So that movement towards the faith healing, the laying on of hands, in whatever religious denomination or expression it was seen as a cult, which we got to really make sure that we understand that the idea of a cult, even that time, was separate from a sect. And a sect is when there's a splintering or an offshoot of an established religion or denomination.
Gotcha. I think this is so important because
is.
as I'm doing my research this week, I'm thinking, who am I to say that this is a cult? And when does it get named and actually identified and labeled
Right.
as a cult? And this is so interesting.
And it's only been in the last 30 years that really, are the people that we're standing on the shoulders of really sat down and kind of laid out the parameters of, okay, this is what constitutes a cult. A
Right.
cult is ABC, and we'll go into that.
In the sort of negative connotation that we've come to know it, when it's
Right.
causing harm or
Right.
abnormal human behavior, things
Exactly.
like that. Okay.
And that's one of the things that they also point out is that they use this idea of in description of a cult that it is a socially deviant group. But that doesn't mean, I'm not talking about like deviant sex.
Right.
I'm not talking. It
Deviant means
deviates
different.
from what is considered to be the norm. So
Right.
your cult believes that wearing a Dixie cup on your head and walking down the middle of Hollywood Boulevard is going to give you enlightenment.
Right.
Then that's obviously deviating.
I think I saw that on my way here tonight.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. It's still Mercury retrograde. So we're gonna blame
God,
everything on
that
for the next-
explains the traffic.
Everything, right?
And it's windy, which is
yeah, it
really unusual.
Always brings out the crazy in Los Angeles. So, what else was I going to tell about? So we talked about that, the derogatory connotations. The movements here in California really set off a sociologist, a really famous guy, Roy Wallace, in the late 70s through the late 80s. And he really talked about cults being characterized by what he called epistemological individualism. So
Okay.
at that time, before it turned into what we're going to be looking at, this is a quote in one of his works that I read: "The cult has no clear locus of final authority beyond the individual member. Cults are oriented towards the problems of the individuals, loosely structured, tolerant, and non-exclusive. They make few demands on the members without possessing a clear distinction between members and non-members." Well, that has completely morphed.
Very much so.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically complete opposite, because how would you define, from what you've been reading, how do you define a cult? What are the parameters?
Definition, I don't know. I think that's still tough. I just think it's still tough to define. I think, taking a lot of how he described it, it's almost opposite in many ways. Manipulating followers and
a charismatic leader.
Sure.
There's not going to be one
that you can
really
think of that
exactly.
Yeah.
There's some in Asia that we won't get into, but that are enormous organizations that don't have one single charismatic leader. But that's really how we have come to understand them here in the West.
And again, we're not focusing on the leaders so much, but my big question through all of this is, I wonder how many of these leaders purposely set out to swindle people or get them to do what they want or just have them in their control, and how many of them did it start off good-natured and then the power and control and ego got the best of them and it ended up that way.
That's exactly where I'm going with my examples.
All right.
That's exactly where I'm going.
Excellent.
Because, as this discussion of this area continued to develop, and especially in the mental health community in the 70s, especially with the development of this was up north, but Jim Jones, who People's Temple, horrible mass suicide and destruction in Guyana. That started in Northern California, but that's like a sort of the typical exemplar of what we would consider to be a destructive cult, with a charismatic leader who slowly, through coercive technique, narrows the life expression and life experience of all the followers, and everything is, there are no more and more decisive process, and individualism is removed from
and then physically, geographically cut off.
Exactly. You cut off
moving to South America.
Yeah. Just move en masse, which is interesting because in the cases that I was looking at, what we're going to be seeing, and I know you'll cover this, is like in those charismatic leaders, there's always paranoia and there's always narcissism.
Yes.
It's like they feed on each other. Power, ultimate power corrupts, and then it turns into those two sort of expressions. So in 1983, there was a really well-known and well-published psychologist, Margaret Singer. She really hit an apex of her career in this particular area. Unfortunately, what happens in the latter years of her career, there was a lot of conflict over some of her publishings, but I still in reading her work, I really have a great deal of respect for her. And she was one of the ones that headed the APA task force on deceptive and indirect techniques of persuasion and control, or DIMPAC. That's a pretty good acronym.
Yes.
And this is the conclusion that she came to, because she was focusing on coercive control, coercion, on what we would call brainwashing.
Right.
And using that term brainwashing was really highly contentious at the time with a lot of other APA members. But here's a quote of hers that I really like. "Cults and large group awareness trainings have generated considerable controversy because of their widespread use of deceptive and indirect techniques of persuasion and control. These techniques can compromise individual freedom, and their use has resulted in serious harm to thousands of individuals and families. This report reviews the literature on the subject, proposes a new way of conceptualizing influence techniques, explores the ethical ramifications of deceptive and indirect techniques of persuasion and control, and makes recommendations addressing the problems described in the report." So once again, harkening back to what we're talking about, where it's a charismatic leader who slowly, gains more and more control. And it reminds me of this, old folksy Southern saying of, how do you boil a frog?
Right.
You put the frog in a pot of water and you slowly turn up the heat.
Sure.
He thinks first it's warm, comfy, frog
feels
jacuzzi,
good,
and then it's frog soup.
Before he knows.
Yeah.
So did her work in this come out of followers from cults now becoming patients in therapy?
No,
And-
her research started after the Korean War. She was the one who spearheaded deprogramming and debriefing and interviewing
okay.
prisoners of war from the
Gotcha.
Korean War, which, the
Lots of similar techniques used. To,
exactly a lot
Right.
of similar, just like isolation, and I mean a lot more initially physical
Right.
abuse
Right.
than a sort of a Western cult would have at first.
Sure.
But that's what she based her research on. And then there was controversy later on because people were questioning how she gathered her data. But so it's
Well, at least it sparks a conversation
Absolutely.
and thought of the influence of people over other human
Right.
beings.
So then there's discussion about putting cults into different categories. And so there are, and I know you probably went a different direction with this, but the big block would be doomsday cults.
Right.
Doomsday cults, which there is where we're talking about there's an overlap, an intersection with a lot of religious groups.
Sure.
We can certainly say that in today's world we've got militaristic doomsday cults that
Right.
also have an overlap.
Right.
Of
Right.
religious zealotry. But doomsday cults have been around for a very, very long time. I mean, they've been around basically. It's in the history of Christianity. They've been around because there's this thing. Pretty much every time the 100-year mark rolls around, somebody
Sure.
is saying that the world's going.
Sure.
Oh, by the way, did you know the rapture's happening on the 23rd? I
No.
just saw that. Just popped up on my news feed.
Oh, good.
I'm not sure which guys.
I'm glad it's popping up on news feeds. It's a good way to let us know.
Exactly. I'm thinking that I might. I have not taken my closet,
Monday?
my stuff. I was going to take it to Salvation Army, but I may just put all my clothes along the sidewalk outside.
On the 23rd
Oh
in
my
the morning.
gosh. Everybody got raptured but me.
Please take a picture of that.
I will. I'll post it.
Post it.
But doomsday cults, whether they find it in a
Some calculation they've done.
some kind of
or-
calculation or a message from an entity,
Right,
whether it's
right,
a
right.
spiritual entity or what they consider to be an alien entity, or it could come from many sources. But that is the focus of it: is that these are the end times, and
Preparing for that.
prepare for the end times. I mean, as if what are you going to
What
are you
does
gonna
that
do?
mean? Right.
I guess for some it means something different. Like, and in one of the examples we have, it's like they're going to go on to a new plane of existence.
Right.
In the example of People's Temple, Jim Jones,
Mm-hmm.
his paranoia was to the extent he knew the U.S. government was coming because he had killed 2 reporters.
Right.
He was in trouble, so I'm going to take everybody down with
Right.
me, which
Right.
is pretty apocalyptic in a
Yes, it
an
is.
immediate
Definitely.
sense.
Have you ever listened to those death tapes?
Oh my gosh,
His speeches right
They're-
before they're about to drink
they're
it.
just awful. They're just awful.
And it was Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid.
It was not Kool-Aid. It was great Flavor Aid.
Great.
One of the ones that I found interesting as far as a consideration of a political cult, which, there's a following of it today that I'm sure they would protest, but Ayn Rand. And,
Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about
her
that in a while.
Political objectivist
Right.
movement is very much, she was a charismatic leader and very, there was not a lot of indication that she had people ever cut off from their family members
Mm-hmm.
because it was all about individual choice. But, individual choice to the point of,
Well, when you brainwash someone or manipulate them so much that they are then making the choice that you want them to make. I mean,
yeah.
You could say any of it.
Who's making the choice
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah.
So that's an example of a political one. The Lyndon LaRouche movement, the National Federal Labor Federation, Gino Parente, those have been called cults. But once again, it depends on who is using the definition and in what way
Right.
they're using it.
right.
We have racist cults. I mean, our country has a history of racism, and definitely those go without even having to say the name.
Right.
And then there are terrorist cults. I mean, those we don't really necessarily see those in Southern California, but worldwide we've seen terrorist cults, and those would be. I mean, Peter Olson, who's a really revered psychiatrist who writes on this subject a lot, would say that to a certain extent, Osama bin Laden would have been
An
considered
example
an
of
example
the leader.
of a charismatic leader,
Right.
That basically created a huge movement based
Sure.
on religious tenets that got narrower and narrower and away from standard considerations of Islam.
Right.
Then we talked about Jim Jones, David Koresh,
Right.
and then who I'm going to talk a little bit about in a bit of Marshall Applewhite, although I wouldn't call him a terrorist, but it was definitely had the one thing that all these people that you look at, they've all got narcissistic personality disorder.
Absolutely.
Every
Well, you
single
have
one of
to.
them. So the interesting thing about these people who end up starting these movements, we look at, when we say narcissistic, there are things that come along with it in a cult, and it's the idea that the goals that we are working towards are the most important things and nothing else matters. So the end will always justify the means.
Right.
And then there's that leader is always someone who is self-appointed, and they're messianic. I mean, they portray themselves as the one who has the answers, as the Messiah, and usually will then take on the mantle, whether it's sort of a Christian overlay or an Eastern philosophy overlay, or they'll take on that mantle as if they are now speaking for divinity.
Right.
And, people who are looking for something like that are going to take it.
Yes.
So let's start off in, the 1920s in LA. That's a really interesting time, like I was
Yes,
talking
it
about.
is. Interesting time for just crime and
Yeah.
true crime and
Yeah, and this was the Wild West. It was still the
Yeah.
Wild West, even though entertainment was just beginning to blossom. Really, there was a bit of manufacturing, but the Los Angeles of the 1920s would not look like today.
Right.
So,
But you have lots of people flocking out here because it's
Yeah.
new. You have Hollywood starting up, people coming from vaudeville on the East Coast to want to be in silent films.
right, opportunity
Yes.
of all kinds, opportunity of all kinds. So there was a woman, a Miss May Otis Blackburn, and she was born in Iowa in 1881, and she founded a religious movement that was called the Divine Order of the Royal Arms of the Great Eleven. Okay, so
That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. What kind of acronym? I can make an acronym. Dorage.
Okay.
Dorage.
I like that. It sounds fancy.
It sounds like a cheap cigarette for women.
I could see May Otis smoking that.
Yes, exactly.
May Otis in her garage.
She was probably smoking something. And here's the thing: it was a major religious movement out here, in that she was able to really, she and her daughter, who were the self-appointed high priestesses. I mean, she was a queen. Her daughter was the high priestess of this movement. They were able to coerce a lot of people into believing and following them. May and her daughter Ruth started telling people that they were the two witnesses of the book of Revelation, and they had followers from Portland, Los Angeles, and then later from around the country who moved out here to follow them. So they were printing tracts, they were getting interviews in papers, they were spreading the word, which, think about how hard that was to do at that time.
Oh my gosh.
No e-media, no nothing.
Right.
So there was some real power behind the message that they had, because they were saying that they had answers. They claimed that they were mediums and clairvoyants, and they were in touch with the angel Gabriel and the angel Michael. And those two angels were, of course, dictating a book to them called The Seventh Trumpet of Gabriel, which was later changed to the Great Sixth Seal. I don't know why they changed the name.
From 7 to 6.
I don't know.
So does it say what city they were?
Yes, they were originally there. Her original house is 2 blocks from my office building.
What?
Not the house isn't there anymore.
Right,
but
right.
it's on Bunker Hill.
Oh, no
the site, there's like a
kidding.
huge skyscraper on it now. But like when I was doing the research, I was like,
Right.
oh my gosh, I walk by there all the day.
Oh my gosh.
So the original, there were pictures of it. There's pictures of it online. It's an old Victorian house, which was
Cool.
really a lot of those down there. she came up with the idea, or she didn't come up with the idea, it was channeled to her from Angel, Michael and Gabriel, that after the impending apocalypse, so note that it's
Right,
apocalyptic.
doomsday.
Yeah. There would be 11 queens that would rule the world from mansions on Olive Hill in Hollywood. And she required her followers to give her money, property, and other objects of value to support her and her daughter. And, you know, she was charismatic. People just gave money hand over fist.
Right.
Basically were working full-time jobs. She bought a huge parcel of property up in the San Fernando Valley, built a temple, a very expensive temple, and bunkhouses and a mansion, and apparently had a gilded throne that weighed like a ton. I mean, it was
Wow.
kind of crazy. And
Just so much excess in a time that
yeah,
it was really rough on people.
Exactly. There were two things that were interesting that happened. One was that there was a couple that moved to Los Angeles to follow her and her daughter, and they had a daughter that was what was her name? Willa Rhodes. Willa Rhodes was I think a 16-year-old young woman. They were all indoctrinated into the movement, but unfortunately, Willa got a toothache. And back in those days, anything will kill you.
Yeah.
So Willa gets an infection, dies of a toothache. The parents are
Dies of a toothache.
dies of a toothache, dies of the infection.
An infection.
They call May and her daughter to her side. You know, help us. And they immediately had this revelation that the daughter was going to come back after 1,000 days. She was going to come back to life. So they put her body in a tub and they covered it with ice and spices and salt and sugar, just making basically a...
So 2+ years you got to wait
So
around.
they've got to keep their daughter for 2 years.
And they promised these poor parents
They
that.
promised them that,
Great.
and more money, and they would take the body on rides in the car around the city of Los Angeles. Like, that must have smelled.
Oh my
I know.
God.
But eventually, I think what's indicated is the body decomposed to the point where they buried it under the house, surrounded with the bodies of 7 dogs that they had sacrificed. Apparently, they were doing a lot of animal sacrifice.
Oh my gosh.
Including donkeys, for some reason. They were dancing in the woods naked up in the San Fernando Valley. And
There's all kinds of stuff wrapped into this
yeah, seriously.
cult.
But so far, they haven't gone out of their way to hurt anyone.
Right.
What they did do was they had gotten a lot of money from a guy, Clifford Dabney, who was a nephew of oil magnate Joseph B. Dabney, and basically took him for $50,000 at that time. So
Oof.
take $50,000. I mean, that would have been a couple of million
Yeah.
at least by now. He actually figured out he was being conned, or felt like he was being conned, and took her to court. She lost court. She lost the court case, and then that instigated a huge investigation where the body was found. They weren't found guilty,
Right.
like of killing her, because they didn't kill her, but it was a huge scandal. So on March 2nd, 1930, Blackburn was convicted of 8 counts of grand theft. So they allowed her to stay in LA County Jail until her court case came up. But the court decided, hey, you know what? The disappearance of this young woman and then her death doesn't have anything to do with the fraud. And they kind of just said, we're not even going to deal with this weirdo stuff. We're just going to talk about the fact of what happened with this
Right.
money. So what they did was they found her guilty
Okay.
of financial fraud. She was found innocent of the others, but she just sort of faded out. I mean, she stayed in
Wow.
Los Angeles. She wrote another book in 1936. But suddenly I think her followers were disenchanted, and so the cult itself sort of fell apart. And
Well,
these were like hundreds of people, dancing nude in the woods.
Hook, line, and sinker,
Yeah.
or just in it, came from all over. It seems like so many of these, as fast as they blow up, just crash and burn, and it's usually financial.
Right.
they go bankrupt or, in this case, get caught that they were actually defrauding individuals. Or people just become disenchanted kind of in droves and then leave.
Yeah, it seems like it.
So-
Unless it's gotten to the point where it's so large that it's self-sustaining.
True.
And there are other people. I think one of the things that we saw, we're not using it as a definition in this one in our discussion tonight. But when you look at somebody like David Koresh, David Koresh had and Jim Jones and People's Temple, he had indoctrinated other men.
Right.
Let's also say this, like giving an example of two men, and they were backed up by thugs, basically.
Right.
Like, they had second-hand guys that were like, where he gives them the spiel of like, you're special, you're going to be next in line. So they're the ones who are happy to be, the heavies to
Right.
keep everybody else in line.
Right.
So that can sustain one of these movements for a longer time and ultimately probably be a big part of the downfall, because ultimately, how are you going to keep other powerful people in line?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think Negan from The Walking Dead is a cult leader? Do you think that's a cult? What are they called again? His group?
I stopped watching it. I'm sorry, Negan ruined it for me. I gave
How?
up. It's like
the same thing.
It's a smarmy character, and I got tired of it.
I
It's
know.
like, okay,
I know.
all the good stuff is anyway. That's a whole other
Sorry.
one. That's my.
Bringing some entertainment
So-
references in.
What was the other one that I thought was really interesting? So moving forward, we're going to go forward now, basically 100 years, or close to 100 years. Last week, 2 weeks ago, was
Yeah,
the
a couple
20th
weeks.
anniversary of Heaven's Gate. And for those of you that are listening, I'm sure most of you probably have heard of this, but if you haven't, Heaven's Gate is a really fascinating and tragic story of a cult here in San Diego. It had actually moved to San Diego from other parts of the country because they had been wandering for a while. And this is a cult that we would say is hitting all these hallmarks of a charismatic leader who increasingly becomes more paranoid.
Right.
And it is quasi-religious and sort of framed in science fiction.
Right.
So,
I actually came across one type of cult that they actually named alien cults. And so I think this would kind of fit into
it
that
does
as well.
It's alien, doomsday, and destructive.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are several religious movements that basically say, and have been saying for the past 200 years, we're living in the end times. So they are doomsday-based belief systems,
Right.
but they're not destructive. They're not actually advocating suicide or violence
Right.
To those means. But Heaven's Gate, it was March 26, 1997. 39 people were found dead in a California mansion. And I remember watching the news.
Me too.
And the initial report was that it was all teenage boys. They all thought it was
really?
teenage boys because they were all wearing like tracksuits and
Nikes.
matching sneakers, the
Right.
Nikes, and they all had like super short buzzed haircuts.
Gotcha.
And it was later found that was sort of the general look, and that the men were actually the reason the men even looked younger and more androgynous is because many of them had self-castrated, which was a part of the
okay.
movement.
Okay.
So Heaven's Gate is
And Heaven's Gate was their name for their cult?
yes,
Okay. Or
yes.
their organization?
And the website is still active. It has not
is
changed in
it?
20 years, but it's still up. So
Check it out.
check it out, folks.
Lots of purple.
Yeah, lots of purple. So this is also something interesting too, because we're going to talk about how two people come together and in the worst way possible.
Yes.
Because they were not good for each other. Marshall Applewhite was a minister's son, and he had a lot of different career attempts. He had worked as a teacher. He had been a singer. I think he'd been a music teacher as well. He'd owned a deli, and he'd been in the military for a short while. And he crossed paths with a nurse in Texas named Bonnie Nettles, and she felt that she was psychic, and that when she conducted seances, that her spirit familiar or her spirit guide was the spirit of a 19th century monk.
I'm sorry, she was a nurse?
She was a nurse.
Oh, God.
So they met in 1972. They immediately became very good friends. And Applewhite assumed and sort of asserted that the two of them knew each other from a past life.
Okay.
So they had this connection. And then I believe Nettles' response to that was that extraterrestrials had told her that they were actually lovers in a former life.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting, and I won't go too far into it, but one of the things when you really get into Marshall Applewhite's background, Marshall Applewhite was a closeted gay man, and really coming from a very religious family, he could not deal with it.
Sure.
And he was not really able to consummate a relationship with Bonnie, and eventually folded into his belief system that the only way for you to ascend as a spiritual / alien being was to be completely celibate.
Oh my gosh! And then you have the self-castration stuff.
Well, he was the one that did it. He first did it.
gosh.
He found a doctor that would perform the surgery in Mexico, and then his followers. He encouraged his male followers to do it as well. There have been so many books written about this, and for those of you out there that want to go down this rabbit hole, I encourage it because it is really fascinating. Once again, like May Otis and her daughter, here are two people that feel like they are the ones that have intrinsic, specific, and revelatory insight into the book of Revelations.
Right.
And so what they start doing is they start interpreting it through this science fiction lens and this idea that biblical prophecies were sort of metaphors for aliens visiting the world, and that Earth was always under sort of supervision, but we were kind of left here. We were seeded by these alien worlds, and we were left here to develop on our own, and that the ship was going to come back and pick people up. Now, that wasn't the initial belief, and we don't really have time to go into the evolution of the beliefs because they changed over time.
Sure. It seems like a lot of them do.
Right, because doesn't that go along with the idea of that sort of grandiosity and narcissism of, I'm just going to fold the world around what I need it to be?
Yes. Well, even with the doomsdays, and they have their deadline of when the end of the world is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and then there's an explanation for that.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Which reminds me, I remember being right out of grad school and working at the state prison and working with a really delusional individual who thought everybody was the CIA and the FBI, and I was such a dumbass. I thought, you know what? I'll show him my ID. I'll look here.
That'll change his mind.
Here's 3 IDs of me. I just want this is who I am. There's no reason for you not to trust me. And immediately he said, yeah. That's what the CIA does for you. Is like you got that overnight.
Right.
They probably shipped it out to you from Washington. And I was like, wow, that's a strong delusion.
Yes. Just go with it.
Yeah.
Don't challenge it.
So, but back to Marshall and Bonnie, who changed their names to Bo and Peep and Doe and T. I mean, they just these weird combinations of things that would serve them, I guess, in a weird little, almost childlike, endearing way. Their precise beliefs really shifted a lot, but sort of the apex of what they finally landed on is that the biblical God is actually a very advanced alien, and that the Earth is really on schedule right now to be recycled, and that if you get the right guidance and if you live the right life and you make all these modifications to your lifestyle, you can ascend to this level, and that he called the evolutionary level above human. And they basically sort of immerse themselves in religious studies and this was how they thought, oh, okay, well, we're the ones who have figured this out. We have figured this out.
So even on their website, which is so like 1996.
Yeah, it hasn't
like,
moved. It's a time capsule.
It says that they're waiting for the arrival of the spacecraft from the level above human to take us home to their world in the literal heavens. This is such a cool website.
It's
a time capsule.
Yeah, it is. For the time, that was probably a pretty good website.
Across the top it says red alert. Red alert has this flashing.
It has to let you know.
Yeah, about to happen. It's kind of eerie to think.
But here's the thing. They were not scamming their followers. They were not begging for money. They would ask for donations. They never demanded money. They picked up and went on a road trip all over the U.S. and just started attracting people right and left.
So really believers without that.
Yeah,
intent.
They weren't scam artists. They were true believers. And even though their belief system still was shifting, they went through phases where they had a lot of. One of the things that happened is Bonnie died of cancer eventually, which really, I think, shrunk the group immediately because a lot of them woke up and went, wait, you have all this advanced knowledge and understanding, like how is it possible that somebody's dying of cancer?
Right.
And that really, and they also got kicked out of some communities because they were pretty odd and people started noticing. And he was, Marshall, you can go on YouTube and Marshall Applewhite's videos are still there.
Right.
Somebody uploaded those.
Where did the mansion come from? I remember seeing that on the news as well.
They
Just
rented
thinking,
it.
okay.
They rented it. So somehow I know where the money was coming from them. They had moved to San Diego, and get this, 2 of their followers were sort of on the cutting edge of IT.
Oh,
so
no kidding.
they were developing websites for other people, which was very lucrative business at the time.
Right.
And was, they also were really known at the Sizzler. Because they would go, serious.
I know, I remember this.
They would go to the
yeah.
local Sizzler, and the waitresses were like, they were super polite and always really nice. They always ate, got the salad bar.
All you can eat shrimp.
Well, I think they ate really clean.
Oh,
but
okay.
This is the thing that would piss the restaurant off. They used every lemon they had, because part of Marshall Applewhite's belief was that iced tea with lots of lemon, basically, what is that, an Arnold Palmer?
Yes, which are fantastic. I'm on board with them.
But they would go like, oh my gosh, here come those folks.
Get the lemon wedges ready.
Cut up the lemon wedges. They had been living in campgrounds, but they finally were making enough money to live in that rental mansion. And finally, their plan came about that they had to be ready. And the thing that the event at that time that shifted perspective was the return of the Hale-Bopp comet,
right?
Which I think that only comes like once every couple of hundred years,
right?
If I remember correctly. And their belief suddenly, like we were talking about, that delusion folds into belief system, or vice versa.
Right.
Is that, oh, here comes the comet. The ship is hiding in the tail of the comet, and they're going to beam us up. They were completely fascinated by Star Trek, and they incorporated a lot of Star Trek terminology into their daily
lingo.
Talk with each other. Like they called themselves, they had patches on their tracksuits that said Earth Away Team, because there was always the planetary away teams that were going out to explore.
Here you go, having to explain Star Trek to me again. Are you a little bit jealous of their tracksuits with the patches?
Actually, I'm not. I'm really not. But yeah, so unfortunately, and sadly, part of the way that they were supposed to jump on that ship was to commit suicide. So there was a mass suicide of 39 people.
And how was it done?
Okay, this is fascinating. All the bedrooms in the mansion were set up with bunk beds, and they were to dress all the same. So they were all wearing, I believe, black tracksuits, matching Nikes. They all had the same size piece of purple cloth, which I think was shiny, like a nylon or a rayon something. And they laid it on themselves on an angle over their heads.
Right.
And they took an overdose of, is it Vicodin? Was it a painkiller? No, it's phenobarbital.
Oh,
That's right.
okay.
I remember it was phenobarbital, and they mixed it with applesauce, washed down with vodka. And by the way, you have to take a lot of phenobarbital to kill you.
Wow.
I mean, like it would have been a very high dose,
Right.
or a medium high dose with a lot of vodka.
And so this was, I think, probably, with these ones that end in sort of mass suicide, where it seemed like everyone did it voluntarily on their own. There wasn't some evidence of, then we had to shoot some people in the back of the head.
Right, like Jim Jones,
Right,
which was
right, right.
coercive, where they were going around
big
like,
time.
you have to drink your Kool-Aid, you have to drink the flavor.
Oh, with that many people.
Right, and then they were just gunning. If they were still moving, the guys in charge were gunning them down.
Right.
These people went,
Right.
oh my God, you know what else? This is what, I mean, I kind of want to laugh, but I don't want to, I feel sorry for them.
Right.
They all had a roll of quarters in their pocket.
I know. There's something about that's...
What is that? Like, the thing that challenges me in that is...
It's so odd, but you're going to take U.S. currency with you on a
spaceship to call, or what was,
vending machines?
I don't know. We'll never know. I mean, it's but even get this, there were 2 survivors that were designated to stay behind and spread the word.
Okay.
And they said something like the quarters were for to be able to communicate. So I don't know if there was going to be a phone booth up there or what. But,
Okay.
And
So 2
interestingly enough, in the
survivors.
interviews you read with the 2 survivors, they're very sad. They feel like they're still part of something, and they missed out on the big event, and they know that they're going to be reunited.
Right.
But
right.
they missed the big event, which I just think is sad and somewhat chilling.
It is. Definitely. Look at those. The crime scene photos are available online. It's
Yeah,
just,
you
it's
can
not
just-
gruesome. It's just kind
It's
of
not,
odd.
it's just
and
kind of sad. Oh, and you know
because they're
what?
covered.
The Museum of Death on Hollywood Boulevard has the bunk beds set up. There's
Can
a
we
room.
go? We need
should
to go.
I'd like to see that.
Me too.
That's right across from the, what is it? The campaign against
Psychiatry?
yes,
The
it's the
Scientology.
Scientologist movement against psychiatry.
Right.
Folks, if you're ever in LA, please just go to that.
And I think it's free, right? You
It's
don't
free.
even have to pay to
It's
get
free.
in.
It's free and hilarious, I might add.
We need to do both in
Yeah,
the same day.
we should. We'll just make that. So, number 1 and number 2, there we go. So, I want to end and recommend on my examples before we move on to the next part of our discussion on something that was really an astounding experience because I like you and I back and forth are going, what are you watching on Netflix? Gotta
Yep.
watch this.
Yep.
And one of the things that came up recommended on my feed was a documentary entitled Holy Hell about a cult in Southern California. And I was like, it all takes place in the late 80s, early 90s, or the mid 80s, the early 90s. And I'm going, wow, I didn't even know, what was that? And my jaw dropped open as I watched it, because as I'm watching it, I realized that the leader, the charismatic leader, named Michael Rostand, was a guy that approached me several times at the old athletic club gym on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood. And he approached me because he would see me like in the stretch room or something, and I'd be meditating, or
Right.
I'd take a yoga class, then I'd go meditate. And I remember him approaching me and saying, I remember to this day what he said, there are thousands of meditations. There's only one true meditation, and I know that I can teach you if you want to know the true meditation.
So cheesy when you
It
think
is
about
cheesy.
it.
I've got to say, everybody, you've got to watch this documentary.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal, and it's so well produced. I'm going to do my best to get the director producer on for an interview, because I think he's done a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
And he's also lived through hell. I mean, he really went through it. But I always laugh at myself I look back on my life, and there, as anybody does, and you think,
Sure.
I'm a dumbass.
Right.
How stupid could I have been?
Right.
And I made a lot of mistakes, and I experimented a lot when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, Shiloh, when this guy approached me, immediately, and it wasn't a red flag. I
Right.
just thought, you're full of shit.
Huh. So what did you actually say to him?
I said, "Oh,
I mean, I'm
that's
sure you were
really
polite.
interesting." What, because I'm always polite.
well,
It's
sure.
ridiculous. I was like, "Oh, well, what do you mean?" He goes, "I have meditation meetings at my home,
Right.
And a lot of people come. You should check them out." I'm like, "Oh,
Was he French?
no, he's Latino. I think he was from Mexico.
Michel,
he was like a bodybuilder and a ballet dancer. He actually
That's
had a
right. He
phenomenal,
was a dancer.
phenomenal physique.
Right.
But one of the things that bugged me, I think, may have something to do with now, is that he had a lot of plastic surgery, or he looked like his face had a lot of plastic surgery. I don't mean ghoulish or like freaky, but like something was that like sort of that uncanny valley thing.
Yeah.
But I just thought you're full of crap. So anyway,
Wow,
I didn't know. And so I never really knew. I never really thought about him again. I mean, I'd seen him at the gym,
Right.
And it turns out that he had begun an organization or a movement called Buddha Field.
And that sort of opening scene of the documentary where it's just footage of the followers frolicking in this water.
Yeah.
Totally 80. Like I could see you in striped little shorts and
exactly. Dolphin shorts.
Right, your hair nice and blonde.
What was amazing about watching that was I recognized a lot of people that I knew peripherally. And they're all wonderful people. I can tell you they were some of the nicest people I've ever met.
Right.
So I would and seeing this, footage that's 35 years old and going, I knew him, I knew her. Oh, that's why they all lived in that house together.
Oh,
because this is what he did: is they would, people had full-time jobs,
right?
And his scam was that he would give them meditation lessons, and he would give them readings, and he would give them special coaching, and they all ended up paying him. Mm-hmm. So they were paying him for the opportunity to wait on him, but there was an emphasis on clean with your body. Everybody worked out. Everybody ate really healthy. He was in phenomenal shape. It looked great too. So you look at this documentary, and it's intriguing because they're very attractive people. They're all and they're all
young and vivacious
and vital, and the way, and of course, the guy who's the producer for this is a wonderful storyteller, and he was his name's Will Allen, and for 22 years he immersed himself in that movement, and he was the video documentarian that just followed all of it. So there's just miles and miles of footage that he used to tell this story, and all of these people lived in shared communal homes. They were all, there was a real sense of kindness and support for each other until things started getting weird. And there was sexual coercion that was foisted on men regardless of their sexuality. There were power plays where people were played against each other. And one of the things that was kind of disturbing is that he would sometimes encourage people to have surgeries so that he could see what it looked like before he got something done.
Oh, wow.
That's what I understood from one of the interviews that I read.
Right.
But I totally encourage people to watch this because it is another example of someone who is pure narcissist. What's fascinating to me is, that I didn't really get, is where he learned all this.
Right.
He learned how to manipulate people. This is somebody that he's not doing this just out of figuring out step by step as he goes. I'm convinced that he really figured it out.
Very well planned out.
Yeah, and it started out as this just loving community, and then it turns into some real sadistic movement,
right,
and sadistic actions that Michel took against the members. And the thing was, what was it? I think it was in 2012 when it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. And one of the things that they talk about in interviewing people who got out of the movement, and all of them are so well spoken, they're
So
my
intelligent,
age,
right.
intelligent, is that they put their lives on hold for 2 decades. They did not further their careers. I mean, one thing you'll find out is like these people are all brilliant and artistic and like really amazing people that were all searching for something.
Right.
And what they got was a real connection. They got a real connection with each other.
Right.
But they were taken advantage of.
Right. Like you said, that chunk of their life.
Yeah.
And I mean, your 20s, 30s, 40s.
Right.
Sure. But
So
yes, I like who he chose to interview for the documentary, because in, my piece of who gets into a cult, they're such wonderful, intellectual, just great people.
Well, okay, this is what's funny. Do you remember that Seinfeld episode? Were you a Seinfeld fan?
A bit.
Okay. They had one of the most hysterical episodes that you find out that there's a carpet company in New York, which is actually based on a true story, that there was a carpet cleaning company that was a cult. And Larry David wrote an episode where George finds out
Right.
that from his boss, I think, that they try and recruit you when they come. So he has them come to his apartment, and they're not interested in him.
And he's super offended.
He's super offended. So they're cleaning the apartment and cleaning the carpets, and George is going, wow, I feel so lost. I just really feel like I wish I had some meaning in my life. And the guy's like, yeah, good luck with that.
Oh man.
But I think that's interesting that these people are not stupid. It's like it's the same idea of people often want to say that women who are victims of domestic abuse, well, there's something that's characterologically common about them. And it's not. It's not the commonality in them. It's the commonality in the perpetrator that knows how to utilize aspects of coercive control in order to manipulate people. So
Absolutely.
It's here in domestic violence, we're talking about one-on-one, and then in a cult setting, how it's one who perpetrates on a number of people.
Right.
And he's still around. Like, remember at the end of it, there's a confrontation in Hawaii. There's still about 85 people following him.
Well, and we think of some of the more high-profile, tragic type of cults, like obviously here in California, Charles Manson.
Right.
And not every cult follower is some drugged-out teenage runaway girl. And so researching who these people are, I think, really destroyed that for me. Again, I didn't give it much thought, but that is definitely an outlier.
Well, there were so many drugs being done in the Manson cult too. I mean, like
right, and well, just the times. I mean, that piece of California history also lends to the types of cults. Love cults and the underlying drug use definitely fueled a lot of that, and people are easy to manipulate when they're under the influence
and when they're lost,
when they're reliant.
Especially his 3 female followers.
Right.
They were lost women searching for something, and
right.
He was able to utilize the time, and I really think. I mean, there was so much acid that was done. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was so much acid done.
Yeah.
That I can't help but think that had a lot to do with it.
Sure. With him or with the followers?
With the followers. I wonder very much if he actually partook of all the drugs that he was, as much as he was giving to the followers.
I doubt it. I highly doubt it. But
there's been so much written about him, and one of the things that I think is difficult when you're talking about Manson, and I chose. I mean, there's been so much that's been said on Manson. I don't really feel like there's anything I can add to it.
No.
But these are examples of one that's incredibly current and that I had an interaction with. But the idea that there's a wonderful scene one of the Lord of the Rings movies where you hear Galadriel talk about how an event with enough time becomes a legend, and then with enough time it becomes a myth.
Sure.
So you get so far removed from what actually happened. And I remember when I was young enough to watch the TV movies, was Helter Skelter? Remember?
Right,
Okay,
right.
so Helter Skelter comes out, and they portrayed Manson as having supernatural powers, that he could stop the watch.
Oh,
of the district
really?
attorney
Oh,
in
my
the middle of the
goodness.
trial. It was such crazy. It was like, no,
Right.
why are we expanding
Yeah.
beyond the fact that it's just this guy who's incredibly coercive and,
Sure.
and a terrible human being?
Yeah. Wow. All right, so should we jump into some of the people that
Yeah.
join cults? Overwhelmingly, the research really strongly suggests that it's less about someone's personality type and more about their circumstances in life at that moment.
Right, of course. That makes so much sense.
It's, and there's not people out there that are like, hey, I want to go join a cult, because it's not even evident, obviously, on the surface of that's what it is. But cult members, and that's just what I'm going to call them, typically psychologically healthy. We're not talking about, high numbers of significant pathology going
like Axis
on.
One, we're not saying
Right.
that they all have bipolar disorder.
No. Or, delusional to begin with,
Right.
or anything like that.
Well, then what? Because what could you get out of somebody that's not going to be
Well,
consistent?
sure.
Right? You can't get your needs met.
Absolutely. That would be a terrible person to have as your follower. But they tend to be particularly idealistic. So,
Oh, okay.
they're psychologically healthy, but a little bit more idealistic than the average person. And we're talking wide variety of people, wide variety of backgrounds, education. Again, it's just more kind of where are they at in life. And they're probably going through some sort of normal life transition, or a little
Like a
blip
developmental
or
stage,
roadblock,
yeah.
or some trying time, possibly, that, lots of people, but it could be a period of sort of upheaval or transition that make them really just more open to receiving whatever message the cult is putting out there. So some of those can be like post-breakup is a really common one. So
Okay.
loss of a relationship, this sort of feeling these negative feelings from the relationship, but then also, okay, I need to start a new chapter in my life. That's done. And then this kind of timing happens to where they're getting that need met of starting something new, and maybe something kind of exciting, and making these new connections with people to fill the relationship loss. Also, not so much a transitional period in someone's life, but they find that there are people who tend to be perfectionists sometimes, are drawn
Oh, wow.
because of
I
the
didn't know.
structure.
Okay. So containment.
Yeah. Structure to be followed exactly. But there's also this idea of we as a group, because of what we're following and what we're involved in, we're a little bit better than outsiders. And so that kind of feeds into a perfectionism piece of personality for some people. But it's also that sometimes that desire to be enlightened, and that might mean following a very regimented routine. Or even like you were talking about with, what is it, Buddha Field?
Yeah.
Just diet and or exercise, and just a whole lifestyle change, very much so. And then you kind of touched on it a second ago, but possibly people who are in this sort of existential crisis of who am I, what meaning and purpose can I find in life, and that would obviously be really prime territory for somebody to prey upon someone that's in that period of life. And I mean, a lot of people go through that
Yeah,
at
you know
some
what?
point or another.
I can't help it. I did not know about the perfection. I had not heard that in any other reading. And that is fascinating to me, because think of everything that comes along with someone who has a tendency towards perfectionism. that comes out of a place of anxiety and a place of not feeling that you're enough.
Right.
So you have to overcompensate.
Right.
So if you have to overcompensate, then you fall prey to a charismatic leader who becomes the only one that can actually adequately reflect back to your internal object that you're enough. And then that makes you completely vulnerable for manipulation.
Right. And a lot of the perfectionists grew up in some other sort of organized religion, traditional organized religion, religious families, and just feeling like there's something better out there, constantly striving for something else better.
Or, I mean, if it was really strict and sort of traditional that you are born imperfect and sinful and you have to work towards enlightenment
Right.
and fulfillment, and it's very regimented. Here's somebody that's telling you, "Oh, you're almost there."
Right.
Like this is
just
how
keep
we do it.
working.
Yeah, this
Just
is how we do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's okay for you to have sex
Right.
with me,
Right.
with the leader.
Yes. You and everyone else.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of obvious to me when the research showed that people with low self-esteem really can be taken with this, because one of the tactics, which I'll get into in a second, when they're recruiting followers, is this concept of what they call love bombing.
Right.
Or so-
Which is another aspect of the cycle of violence.
Oh,
Right?
it's
And
completely
Lenore
just-
Walker's
yeah.
cycle of violence,
Yeah.
and domestic violence. Yeah.
Right. So it's over, complimentary, and just you're so beautiful and you're so wonderful. And if someone with low self-esteem has not been told that ever or in a very long time, or it's been challenged for much of their life, this promise of being loved by many people and then to be loved by a leader
Yeah.
or even some other higher power is very enchanting. So, and then the research does show that more women join cults than men.
Okay.
However, I think research shows that more women attend religious services just across the board anyway, so it's not hugely surprising. But there's some researchers and psychologists that say, a lot of women traditionally are sort of taught to seek attention from men and to be cared for and to wait to be provided for and taken care of.
Exactly.
And,
If that's what you're socialized to do after
Right.
4,000 years of, patriarchy.
right, where
Of course you're
men
gonna do that.
are taught to go out and make your own goals
Right.
and go and, make your own path. So, I mean, I think there's some sense to that, to why more women would be drawn to it than men. But overall, more women attend religious functions and ceremonies in general. Individuals who are recruited for cults are often young adults, and usually middle to upper class. So just kind of breaking down a little bit of demographics.
Okay.
But, I'm sure it depends on the region of the country. But, yeah, so it's kind of this combination of idealism that would allow that person to reject sort of social conventions and
Idealism meaning this seems like this would be the path for me to get my
Right.
needs met, to find enlightenment, to find love. This is the way. So I'm going to let go of other things. I'm going to give my full attention to this.
right, which I wouldn't want to join a cult anyway, but I think if I was considering it, I'd be like, wow, everyone's going to think I'm a weirdo. Whereas someone like this would be like, well, I don't care what they think necessarily, because this is correct. This is,
yeah.
I'm open to rejecting what you see as social norms. And I don't know. I think I would be too wrapped up in social norms and
Yeah.
not deviate too much. But
I find it interesting too. I mean, you're probably going to hit on this, but I find it really interesting about the idea of, especially in so many of these coercive, destructive cults or destructive movements with the charismatic leaders, that you shut off your past life. So I could get it if somebody came from a completely damaged, abusive, invalidating life.
Right.
But that's not the whole demographic you're talking
No,
about.
not at all.
These are people that are then, people on, you can go to these deprogramming forums and people talk about losing a family member and they're like, no, our family was great. We were doing great. Now she won't,
Right.
she refuses to have any contact with
Yep.
us because so-and-so told her not to. And
Right.
I can't imagine not doing that. I can imagine being pissed off at somebody in my family, but I'm not going to,
Right.
completely cut off.
Right. Exactly.
Contact.
Yeah. So I guess the perfect recipe for it is sort of that idealism and then maybe that emotional upheaval or, time in their life where they're experiencing some sort of pain or transition.
Right.
And, cults often say they're going to provide solutions to whatever that
Right.
problem is in this
Like the guy
person's
said
life.
to me, there are thousands of meditations. I have the one true meditation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me talk a little bit about recruitment, and that follows up with what you just said. There's always an invitation to some non-threatening event. So, hey, people come to meditation at my house and just meditate. So that's classic. It could be just, going to a party, going to listen to music, go to a poetry reading, something very non-threatening that is just like, hey, come meet my friends. That is just, and has this normal vibe to it. It doesn't feel weird or shady from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, and then is typically where the love bombing will come in, even before you're asked to join or, know what you're going to get out of it. The love bombing will start either at that event or at the next event.
I wonder if I would fall for that. Part of me thinks I could, and the other part of me thinks I could have maybe at that time.
Right.
But the other part was like, this feels weird.
I don't know. I wonder if it's done, genuine enough, and it depends where you're at, what your needs are at that time.
And, the other followers that are doing the love bombing may not be aware that they're doing it either, right? I mean, they could be
true.
this is, we're bringing somebody else in and we're
Right.
going to add to our beautiful collective, like the Borg.
And then at some point, the next step is sort of where they dangle the prize in front of the person. So this is the promise of getting something special out of being part of the group. If you join, if you then choose to conform, I'm going to say in air quotes, to conform, whatever need you're trying to get met will be met by us and or our leader, our group, or however it is for that specific one. And then they don't just dangle the prize and specifically ask you, but they wait for you to agree. Like it's almost a verbal agreement to where now you feel like, okay, I said yes, I'm accountable now.
I've made a commitment.
A commitment, absolutely. Yeah. So that's a very deliberate step usually, in that somehow there is this agreement made. And then when things start to get, when the person they're recruiting has now agreed, yet something is making them feel uncomfortable, whether it's they're asking them for money now, asking them for more devotion, or just asking for more than what was kind of asked for up front. That's when some of the threats can come in, and doesn't necessarily have to be threats of harm or anything like that, but again, sort of threats of, well, then you're not going to get this prize, this thing. So
it's dangling a carrot.
Yeah, it's dangling throughout. But it's definitely, reminding them of, well, if you don't do that, then you're not going to get what you wanted out of this. Which makes the person then feel like, well, yeah, I did agree. That is what I wanted. So why am I not doing that? And it starts the manipulation. And then just implementing of other guilt tactics really is how to keep the person invested and involved throughout. But so that's a little bit about recruitment. after the person has joined a cult, there's a couple things that go on. And I want to talk about conformity because at some point, yes, they do conform to the cult leaders' dictums on how to think, on how to live, and especially when it's these total changes in lifestyles. So you remember our friend Dr. Phil Zimbardo, right?
Oh, yeah.
Stanford Prison Study. Fame. So he has a wonderful quote where he says, as long as there are 3 or more people who agree that reality is not the way you see it, in many cases you will give into the world in their way.
And that has been proven in study after study after study. They've done it on candid camera with the elevator.
Yes.
They've done it.
So the most famous group of those studies are the Asch conformity studies.
I don't remember those.
So if you guys want to look it up, ASCH, there's some YouTube videos on them, and I think they were primarily in the 70s. But what they would do is bring in a participant, an unknowing participant, and they would come in, and that's the subject being studied, but then there would be 3 or 4 other people in this group who were Confederates, who were pretending to also be study subjects. And it would be a bunch of different tasks. It could be like, okay, here's 3 lines, of different lengths, and tell me which one of those, A, B, or C, matches the length of this line over here.
Okay, that one.
And
I
so
do
it's
remember.
clearly B, but all the other
everybody
people
votes that it's
says
not.
A, and the person will overwhelmingly conform to what the group is saying, even though it is so obvious in front of them in black and white that is not the right answer.
Right.
So study after study, just different kinds they've done with different lab experiments.
And was that, okay, who was it that did the electric shock experiment?
Well, that was more about authority.
That was authority,
figure.
but
Yeah.
it could feed into here.
Sure,
as well.
I
That's-
think-
And listening to those tapes, I remember watching those in grad school and like, wow, this is really creepy.
Right, yeah. So yeah, the Asch conformity studies, but really it's being pressured from the group to go against what your belief is, or in those lab studies, what the wrong answer was, or going against what the correct answer was. But this just feeds into kind of the bigger concept of conformity and when sort of the group mentality and addressing or adapting to their belief system. So fascinating stuff.
Wow.
All human behavior stuff. And then psychologists who have studied cults talk about, after this conformity phase, there's then sort of this process of snapping or a sudden shift in personality, which is what you were talking about, or where the family and friends just find it difficult then to relate to this person.
Wow.
And the separation starts to begin of just the belief system being so starkly different and them being made to believe that what they knew of their former life is no longer a reality or relevant to now what they're trying to achieve. So,
Which just, that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. I think if you haven't, I have not experienced that. So I'm really challenged by the idea of being in that position of an individual that's gone past that snap. And
Right.
like, nope, they don't get it. Nobody else gets it. Just this small group of us get it.
right. It is so hard to wrap your mind around that. I think this all sounds totally crazy still. But yeah, the loved ones describe them as strangers now. Just complete strangers. So, but that's, I thought it was interesting and just researching this of, I don't know what I came to the table with, but.
Yeah, but the big thing that you showed that we came away with is that there is no, yes, there are some types, but it's not
Right.
what you think. It's
No.
not that the person is stupid. It's not a stupid person at all.
Right, not totally
It's
gullible.
No, it's somebody who, at the right critical juncture in their life,
Yeah,
seeking something
right.
and coming from something that was either invalidating or was perceived to be invalidating or just didn't meet where they were. that's what propels them into this.
Well, and I know they are more victim than anything, but it really reminds me of looking at criminal behavior, because we all kind of have these ideas of what criminals are and how they act, when a lot of it can be just a perfect storm of sort of factors and circumstances where that choice then ends up getting made.
Yeah.
That choice, of course, being offending behavior, but in this sense, sort of the same thing. The stars are all aligned and just that sounded very culty. The stars are aligned, and there's just the right factors going on at the right time when this is introduced, and it makes them more susceptible.
And we only scraped the surface here. I mean, not only did we barely go into any of we only gave 3 examples of the cults in Southern California, when there are some really fascinating ones. There's one that actually had a chain of restaurants here for a while that was like, all health food health food restaurants. And his name was Father Yod, and it was called the Source Family, and it was a free love cult. There was the Symbionese Liberation Army started in California as well, which actually started out with great, Symbionese meant symbiote, symbiosis. They wanted all the races to come together, but then it turned into a terrorist cult because of, they diverged in their purpose.
Right.
So
it's funny you mentioned the restaurant thing, because in some of the research I came across, they actually were talking about the founders of Cafe Gratitude.
I read that too.
Yes, and how they strongly encourage but don't require them to watch certain videos. Is that what it was?
And it'll be interesting to see what kind of pushback we get when this posts. But that's another.
Because that's such a LA
that's
thing.
Story. Yeah, because it's landmark.
Right.
So there's a movement, and I only know a little bit about it, but I think the original movement was called the Forum.
Okay.
And then Landmark was an offshoot of the Forum, and those were based on principles of Est, which was a big movement in the 70s. Okay. Now, what's fascinating about Landmark is that, look, at its core are some really good things that very much fall in line with dialectical behavior therapy.
Okay.
And sort of looking at yourself through a clear lens. However, they're really coercive in making you spend money on additional courses and going to this level and buy this material. And that part was, I was filming a commercial, and half the people on the commercial had just done Landmark, and they were all just buzzing with like this crazy energy, and they were like, every time you said something, they'd go, well, that's a story you're telling about. And now I laugh because it's 30 years later. I'm going, okay, as a narrative therapist, when I'm doing individual therapy, that might be the same context I use for framing an issue for a client, but without this sort of zealot fervor in my eyes.
Right.
It was very disturbing.
Ooh.
But yeah, Cafe Gratitude. that's, look, the food is great.
Well, and you just think of like crunchy granola, California, again, coming back to like, what is the draw? Right. And this sort of hippie vibe. And
I'm going to leave your menu right here. Today's special is aptitude. So I hope you'll consider aptitude.
And you better finish the bottom of that bowl so you can read what it says at the bottom.
And I am not exaggerating. That's like every single wait person I've had at a Cafe Gratitude.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to leave this with you for a while, and I'll be right back.
Why did we not go there for lunch this week to prep for this? There's one in the Arts District now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want another one in Larchmont.
Let's go.
So to wrap things up, I was going to say that one that's very very interesting in how it relates to LA, and here we are, LA Not So Confidential, is the Children of God, or also known as the Family, and that was a Christian cult that started off like a long time ago. This is like had been going on for 40 or 50 years.
Wow, yeah.
Actually started off in the 20s. but had come to LA in 1968. And I can't remember who the initial leader was, but David Berg was the most well known. And it was very much a polyamorous Christian cult, and they were the ones, in order to entice newcomers, they used what was called flirty fishing. Like fishermen, you
Right.
will be, like Christ said, you will be fishers of men. Is that they would send their women out to flirt with guys and say, hey, you can come back and have all the sex you want. And then, unfortunately, it started getting into sex with family members, and
Right.
it was and a lot of people were realizing,
Ancestral.
wait, we're being encouraged to have sex with minors, and people left in droves, thankfully. And interestingly, the ones who got out were some very well-known celebrities whose families got them out. Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh,
His
right,
parents
right.
were part of that, and we're like, no, we're out of here.
Right.
Rose McGowan's
okay.
family were like, nope, we're out of here. And both of them, Rose McGowan says that she never had the experience of being abused, but she knew that her parents knew that it was time to get out. Glenn Close, very famous award-winning actress, was part of a cult across the U.S. called Moral Rearmament, which made its money by, do you have any idea?
I have no clue.
Up with people. Remember that?
No.
Or you're too young? When I was growing up, that was a huge auditorium show that traveled around the world, and it was just all these. It was like 75 fresh-faced kids singing about, America and morality, and they had dance numbers, and they were all just adorable, and it was part of a cult.
Oh, wow. That reminds me of this
She
one.
talks about getting out of it and realizing, she realized early, like, oh, this is weird.
Right.
And she even credits being a better actor because she had to act like she believed all the hooey that they were selling.
Oh, my gosh. When I was in a drill team, there was this group that would perform called Sunshine Generation.
Oh, wow.
And that totally reminds me
It's like
of
the
that.
Brady's Sunshine Day. Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle Pfeiffer, when she came to LA, I think she came from San Diego, she was rooming with a couple that were, I don't want to be, they were breatharians.
Breatharians?
They believe, and there are people that actually still believe in this philosophy that actually you can train your body to need nothing but air.
Oh.
And that if you're living a really pure life and you've moved to that level, that you can actually,
No food, no water.
food, no water. All you need is to get all your nutrients is air. And it wasn't until she had started dating an actor who was to become her husband, Peter Horton. Peter Horton from 30-something. And they were doing a project on cults. And apparently she was looking at this, reading about it, and realized, oh my gosh, I've been involved in a cult.
Was she still living with those people?
I think she had left already. But she was like, I kind of realized, oh my gosh, this is what's been going on for me. And of course, the Arquettes. The Arquettes, not really so much a cult, but they were part of a commune that got very cult-like, and all the kids were abused by the parents pretty badly, but they were able to move away. That was Skyman Subud, which was sort of an Eastern philosophy that had moved to the U.S. And then, of course, we didn't really talk about it because it's been talked about so much, but Scientology is huge in Los Angeles. Not as huge as it would like to be considered, but Leah Remini has spoken out publicly about her experience. I think it's fascinating and good for her.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely wish her the best. And Jason Begay, who was another, he may not be a household name, but he's a really talented working actor that's been around for 35 years, and he had given his life to that movement. And he just realized one day, no, this is not real.
Well, and I admire Leah Remini and people who come out and are able to be very sure and solid about what they now believe, and and her taking kind of like the fight along with it, because so many people like you were describing, some of the people you knew that have these decades ripped away from them. How do you come to terms with that? Some people are just like, well, no, I don't regret it. And it's really hard to look at it for what it is
Right.
when you were a piece of that for so long.
That would be fascinating to talk to one of these people about. There are a couple of people I'm going to approach through social media that I hope will consider talking to us, because it's that very idea. I mean, so much of the work that I do in my private practice is about identity development.
Right.
And the idea of having just this enormous chunk taken away from you. You talk about the snap in, you were using
Right,
that term snap
right.
in, and then the idea of snapping out.
Yes.
And how unbelievably painful that must be.
Oh, sure.
But fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks so much for tuning in this week. We really appreciate it. Please let us know what else you want to hear about. You know how to reach us. We're very excited about some upcoming shows, but if you have ideas and specific things you want us to focus on, we'd love to hear your ideas.
Absolutely. Keep them coming. And we love even, stuff like this that, maybe we're not totally diving into all the time is so fun to research and then kind of give you our 2 cents about it and how it overlaps with our world. So, we look forward to hearing your suggestions, and otherwise we'll keep doing some research and put together some good content for you. And thank you for bearing with us in some of these lulls. So we will see you next time on LA
Not so.
Confidential.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Take care.